tired of screwing up, tired of going down, tired of myself, tired of this town.
Eminent Waste of Time, Episode 4. We are now over 10% of our way to our 30-episode goal.
Yeah, and better than half of our 7 goal. You got to make it to 7, or we didn't
Yeah, that's
exist.
right. We're not a success if we didn't make it to 7, or we don't have a chance. We don't have a chance of continuing, or something. I don't know. It's kind of a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe we didn't exist.
Anyways,
we never existed.
Anyways, I'm Doug.
And I'm Chad.
And together we make up Eminent Performance, and thanks for coming back for a 4th punch in the face. This week was a little bittersweet with the passing of Tom Petty. We didn't really choose our intro song specifically because we're huge Tom Petty fans, but the thing we both described it as was recognizable. Like,
yes.
You instantly knew what it was because he's basically one of these rockers that's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so we wanted something recognizable, but a little offbeat, and to a point we wanted something free to use that we didn't have to pay for rights for, so that kind of fit the bill as well.
Because we're not making any money doing this at all. None.
This is probably costing us on some level or another.
I'm sure it is. There is audio equipment I have bought that is littering this room right now.
We have literally spent tens of dollars on this podcast.
More than that, but you get what we're saying. But no, it's sad, as Doug was talking about. Tom Petty was never really one of my favorites. I'm not saying I hated him. His style wasn't necessarily the style of music that I listened to. But I did enjoy several of his songs. He was one of those people who I could listen to some of the songs, and others, just wasn't my style. So
yeah, he was definitely just a really super recognizable artist, though. You instantly knew it was him when he was singing, and just even the style of music. If there was no lyrics, you knew it was one of his songs.
I always thought Tom Petty was like Bob Dylan reincarnated 30 years later or something.
I think he's more listenable than that.
Oh no, I'm not saying like talent-wise. I'm just saying like the attitude of like that they both portrayed seemed to be that.
Yeah, he was a balladeer. You know, he wrote songs that were about life experience. A lot of his songs were about him and his experience, and it seemed like he observed people and would write songs about them as well, as opposed to modern music. I think has kind of lost some of that in some ways.
By some of the fine country music we were discussing this weekend that I cannot remember the lyrics to.
Chew tobacco, spit.
Yes, that one. The fine lyricists of our day. I can't even tell you. There's the Yeah Boy. Was that a song?
Yeah, boy. Well, yeah, she repeats Yeah Boy it's like Yeah Boy, something, 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 Yeah Boy, something, something, something. It's just, that's the whole chorus.
Yeah.
Boy.
No. That I can't do country music. Not like older country music. I'm fine with. I mean,
you actually have some Johnny Cash in your like just normal rotation mix.
Yes, I do. I like Johnny Cash. I like Travis Tritt. George Strait is good. I mean,
well, that's back when it was actually country music, and it's kind of pop now.
I call it frat boy country.
Yeah, it's kind of pop music. I mean, I don't mean to disparage, but it is. Everything's kind of. I think a lot of music is just trended towards the center, which is pop. It's whatever sells. So
yeah, tight jeans and on boys or girls doesn't matter, and lyrics that don't mean anything anymore. So no, it was sad seeing that Tom Petty had died, but we will soldier on.
And to the, a lot of people are relating the experiences they had about him and how it made them feel, but just want to shout out there. I doubt anybody's ever going to hear it, but to, his family that survives him and his close friends and stuff, we're sorry for your loss. I think a lot of that gets lost, that he was a person too and had relationships, and sometimes when you're people are celebrities, that gets lost in the mix. So our condolences to the family and friends and those he left behind. But this weekend we had a race.
We went out and we raced. It had been a while for us. We missed
2 in a row, so that would be 6 weeks?
Yeah. And 6 weeks felt like an eternity. Well, we didn't miss the one. we chose not to race. It was just not a good course. It was a bad course. I'll say that way.
Basically, we decided we did not want to go in, wreck the machine, sit in the woods forever while it got pulled out, and then spend a bunch of money putting it back together, because it was a legitimately nasty track. I think we talked about that on a previous one. That it was just everybody suffered somehow who ran.
Yeah, it wasn't worth it to us. Plus, we have to take 2 drops per season, so we decided to take that as one of our drops. And then the next race after that we had talked about this, but I'm catching everybody up who missed it or didn't pay attention.
Basically, I headed back up north to see family and stuff for Labor Day weekend, and you had a bunch of other things going on. Just
catching up on work things. Well, not work like paid work, like working on things.
It's all that stuff you intend to get to on the weekend, and then the weekend comes and you don't get to it, so then you have a holiday weekend. You got the extra day.
Yeah, and that day just becomes, I'm going to work more.
Yeah, it's not a day off. It's just a catch-up day. But anyways, we finally got back on the track. I'll cut to the chase. If you haven't followed the posts already, we finished second place. Now, full disclosure, there was only 3 of us. And the guy who finished third place broke down on the first lap. So
we claimed second very easily. Let's put it that way. But in all seriousness, man, when you go out there and you have trouble after trouble on a long stretch, and like we have had here in the middle of the race season, you're almost gun shy. I mean, you go out there and you're like, I just have to make it. And we even did that one round, and we're like, I just want to make it. And we didn't at all.
I think like literally during the first lap, at one point I was like, we're just finishing the race. That is the plan. We're just going to finish this race. Because I think even if the mindset being, even if we just finish, we're still going to do better than a lot of the pack. We've proven that the machine's faster, and so we figured we were not going to be behind the small machines like the 570s and stuff like that. So even if we finished middle of the pack, at least we finished one.
Yeah. I felt good about how the race went. The course was a mixed bag. I was telling somebody else it was 90% great track and 10% otherworld crap. I mean, it was. So most of the track was pretty good. I mean, it had its tight technical sections, and like we've talked about previously, I don't mind the tight technical sections. But the rest of it was open enough where you could get on it for short spurts, and then you're hard on the brakes for the turns. And
there were even sections in the woods you could have passed.
Yeah, I mean
it was wide enough to get a buggy by another one if you had to.
Yeah, if you had to. Now they weren't everywhere, but man, and then you get into it was the Pro Hill and the bypass around the Pro Hill. Oh my gosh!
Words are tough for me. As I was trying to say, it was something along the lines of, would you like to be shot or stabbed? Like, those are your options. Neither one was good.
So the Pro Hill, well, we'll get to the Pro Hill second. The bypass around, which is what we took, and I'll explain why we took it in a second. But the bypass around it was about 2 acres of powder. Like, clay had just been turned and churned on by all these racers, and it was like moon dust powder that just floated in the air.
And we haven't had any appreciable rain down here for well over a month. So it's dry. I mean, even if you water the stuff, it's just the top millimeters wet, and everything underneath is just dry. So by this time of the day, people have been driving over it, and like you said, it just got churned up, and it literally was just moon dust. There's actually a video on Facebook, somebody saying, here's my entire weekend summed up in one video, and it just looks like a pile of dirt, and he puts his foot down and it goes in like 18 inches.
Yeah, like up his shin. And that's how it was. You'd step in, because I track sweep there too, and you'd step in, and some places you'd bury to your knee.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's insane. And it's like walking through water all day right in that area. And that's where I kind of mainly focused my day at. But, and then all around it was just rocks, like boulder rocks, not little rocks you can drive over easily.
This wasn't pebbles. This wasn't, nice big chunky gravel. This was literally, rocks that were 12 to 18 inches in diameter.
Yeah. So first lap, we come up to the Pro Hill, and I'll tell you what the Pro Hill was. It was a real hill. I mean, it was legit. So
I'll give you an idea. I hate to interrupt you. I'll give you an idea, folks. When the quads went up it, on day 2 when the quads were running on Sunday, most of the pros didn't make it up Pro
Yeah.
Hill. There's literally only, I think, 3 or 4 people on the track that successfully made it up Pro Hill, and one of them was running a Can-Am 4x4.
Yeah, it was bad. And even the bypass, people were flipping over. Like, they'd have to take 3 and 4 runs at it. I mean, it was bad. Now, it was fun. It was a challenging part. So the first time we come to the Pro Hill, and we got the whole shot out of the gate.
Yep.
We led the first 2 laps.
Yep.
Right at or 1 3/4 or whatever it was. But the first time we get to the Pro Hill, one of the heavies or pros, somebody in the lines in front of us had wrecked or flipped or whatever happened, and they were blocking the Pro Hill. So we had no option to take it. The officials waved us off, and we had to go the bypass. So that's fine. We were kind of planning on that anyway because I knew we were on a worn belt, and it was like, I just want to get it through.
And honestly, the hill was steep enough that we just weren't sure that an 800 had the horsepower to get up there. We knew the 900s, maybe, the 1000s and the 1000 turbos, sure, but we just weren't sure that we had enough to get up that hill. And you don't want to get up 3/4 of the way and find out you were wrong.
Yeah. And to give you an idea of scale on this, the hill was easily 45 degrees and probably like from the base of it to the top, now not like linear running feet, it had to be 50, 60 feet tall.
Oh, easily.
It was
if
big.
not more.
Yeah, it was big. I'm not trying to over-exaggerate it, but it was big. And for an 800, that's a lot. So we bypassed it the first time. We go on around. We're running good. The machine felt good. Everything felt fine. We were good. We get around there the second time, and as we're kind of coming up to the second Pro Hill, it's blocked again, and they wave us off. And I started telling Doug just after that, I said, something's not quite right. I mean, like I said, something's...
Words I wanted to hear.
Yeah, something felt funny in the steering, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. It kind of felt like a dead spot in the middle of the steering, but I couldn't sort it out. I'm driving, and I'm not really trying to mechanically diagnose things. I'm trying to race. So, whatever, I'm going on. We come to it the third time, and it's actually open. But at this point, Doug is monitoring like belt temperatures, and the steering is getting much, much worse.
And I'm staring at the belt temp gauge, and it's reading between 212. It's bouncing basically between 210 and 216, and averaging around 212. And we haven't gone up the hill yet.
Yeah.
We're staring at the hill, and so the Pro Hill is open, and I tell Chad, hit the bypass because I don't think we're making it up.
Yeah. For those of you who don't ride UTVs, I'll explain that those belts really don't like to be over 200-ish degrees for very long. You can do it. They're going to come apart.
And we could already start to feel that the machine wasn't responding normally. It was sluggish. You could actually, even as a passenger, I could feel the belt slipping when he was trying to get on it and be aggressive and come out of a corner. You could tell the machine was not responding like it normally does.
Yeah, and we probably have an air filter just clogged with dirt and everything else, and I haven't cleaned it yet from the race, so we bypass it, and I don't lose my sense of humor even in racing. I laugh about it to this point because when we get to that bypass and I see that hill that we got to climb with these rocks, and it's probably 30 or 40 feet tall. At like a 30-degree angle, I would guess.
It's still pretty good.
I mean, it's a stout hill. I yelled to Doug and to the machine, "I'm sorry, little belt, please hold on."
We're both picturing this thing like just coming apart in pieces, again, 3/4 of the way up the hill, and that's the last thing on earth we needed at that point.
So we did make it to the top of the hill. The belt was just frying at that point. I mean, I could smell it.
218.
218, yeah. I think I looked down and saw it tap 220, and then it came down, and I told Doug, okay, we're just going to have to limp this one around because if I keep racing the machine, I'm going to blow the belt, and it's going to drop us back here at the furthest point from everything.
Yeah,
and
it always breaks down on the opposite side of the track. That's just how things go.
And the steering at this point is getting worse. I'm not going to say much worse until we get to a little further. But I told Doug, well, okay, I think we had about a mile left until we got back to the finish line. And I said, let's take it easy. We have no one pushing on our back door right now because the guy who was in second had gotten around us. He took the pro hill. It was open for him. So we limped it around. I said, okay, we got our third lap. Let's pull over and let's evaluate and see what we've done or what I've done. You're just riding. I've done it. And we get out and look, and I honestly, I will say it, I thought that I had sheared teeth off of the steering rack internally. There's no external damage because the thing had like a 6-inch dead spot in the middle where I could try and turn the wheel, nothing would happen, and then all of a sudden it would jump. Now, come to find out, after I looked at it the next day, or 2 days later, when we got back from racing, it wasn't that at all. What had happened was the jam nut had backed off of the tie rod, and the tie rod had spun, and it had come so far out of alignment, it had towed itself out so far, that in the silt, one tire would ride up in the silt and not grip, and I would be turning and not knowing that it's not gripping, and then all of a sudden one or the other would grab and it would shoot me across the track, and it was bobbing back and forth, and I couldn't figure out why it was doing it. I mean, Doug looked at it. We were probably 4, 5, 6 inches out of tow.
It was significant. I mean, just looking at the front of the vehicle, you could see, even if you didn't know what alignment was, that it was not right. Yeah,
the people at the finish line, they're people that we know, they said, something's wrong with your tires. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I could tell because I was shooting around, but literally nothing was mechanically wrong with the machine other than it had taken itself out of alignment so badly.
I had gotten so used to jumping out of that thing and seeing bent tie rods and out of whack alignment because of that, to jump out and be like, no, the axles are intact, the tie rods are intact, everything looks fine.
Why is it towed so bad? Yeah, and we couldn't figure it out. So at that point, we had spent, I don't know, what did we spend, 5 minutes, 2, 3 minutes, I don't know, something like that, looking at it when we had pulled over. We stood no chance of catching the first place guy at this point in our class.
We hadn't seen the guy who was in third. We didn't know he was out, but we kind of had an inkling something had happened there, and that coupled with the fact that the belt was slipping enough it wouldn't cool down. We knew we had chewed through the belt. We probably should have replaced it before the race, but we weren't sure how bad it was. And even if we went back through, even if the steering issues weren't there, we didn't want to go back in the woods and just bury that thing out in the woods with a broken belt, because there's enough significant hills there, and the belt not cooling down told us it was slipping basically the entire time we were driving. There's just no way to make that work.
Yeah, because I told Doug, I said, well, I have tools back at the truck, and per the race rules, we can leave the track, go make repairs, and come back at the same point at which we left the track and finish the race. But we talked about it, and it didn't make sense to go out there because I knew that belt was going to let loose on us somewhere out there. It had no miles left on it, and I've pulled it apart since that, and I've looked at it, and we're showing cords, and it is partially separated in places. Like, I'm glad
we were lucky to make it up that hill.
Yes.
Seriously.
Oh, and that's why I jokingly and not jokingly yelled, "I'm sorry, little belt, please hold on." Oh.
So we just took our second place finish and went home. Well, we didn't go home because we had to work the rest of the weekend, but...
Yeah, well, we loaded it on the trailer, and it's always a good race weekend when you can drive it back on the trailer.
Yeah. So that was our race. Not particularly exciting, but honestly, it was the first race I think that I didn't feel like we'd necessarily done anything wrong, and that I enjoyed the race. Like, it was a fun track. It was wide open. Didn't really like the pro hill and the bypass so much, but everyone I talked to didn't really like it either, and they had to race the same track we did. But no, overall, I actually just had a really good time, and it was enjoyable. And I don't want to say it's the first time that's happened, but it'd been the first time in a while that it wasn't just ended in some sort of ridiculous frustration.
Yeah, I agree. That was my takeaway too. While we're kind of talking about this, I have a new segment I'm springing on you right now.
Great.
So when we have a race weekend, what is your favorite memory of the race weekend?
Favorite memory of the race weekend?
And if you want a few minutes to think, I'll go first.
Okay, you can go first.
Okay. So I'll tell my story. I track sweep, and on Sunday, the quads were running. And what I do is I'll like play the national anthem, like a MP3, not like I'm playing the national anthem like on an instrument. And Doug's out there, letting the rows go and everything else. And this particular track was set up to where by the time we got all the rows off and I jumped on my quad and I took off, I went the back way through the track, and I could get to the backside of the pro hill just as the first group was getting there. So it worked out like perfectly, because that's where they all needed help, or I was at the bypass, but right there at that big hill. So I pull up there, and this kid's sitting there, and he's like trying to put a stick in his ignition. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So I pull up and I said, something wrong? He goes, I've lost my key. His key had turned off and fallen in this silt and he had rolled to a stop. Yeah,
it might as well be lava. It's gone.
It's gone. Like and he knew he was not trying to find it. He's like, it fell off, 100 feet back there, and it just rolled to a stop here. Because he didn't know he'd lost his key when it just shut off. It just shut off, and he thought something happened. So he's trying to figure it out, and all of a sudden, it was enlightenment. Like, an epiphany comes to me. This is my time to shine. My product of a misspent youth has come into use. I hotwired the dude's bike right there on the side of the track, and he finished the rest of the race.
Done.
Funny thing is, 10 minutes later, I did it again for another guy.
Nice.
He flipped his quad on the Pro Hill bypass, lost his key in who knows where, in the silt again. And he's like, I can't start it. I'm like, I can hotwire that.
See, this is my whole argument, though, for racing machines should just have a toggle switch. They should have like the missile switch. You flick the cap up, turn the switch on, and then...
I agree, but a lot of people don't use these machines for just race purposes.
That's true.
So that was my moment from the weekend, is I hotwired 2 bikes, and the first guy, as I'm just getting it wrapped up and I'm twisting his wires together, and I don't have like electrical tape or anything. I'm just like getting it out of the way and tucking it under other things. I go, don't tell anyone I know how to hotwire bikes. It'll look bad. And he laughs, and I send him on his way, and he was yelling thank you as he's, throwing dust back at me. But that was my memory from the weekend, from the race weekend.
Man, it wasn't that I couldn't remember one. It was I was trying to narrow it down to one. It was a really fun weekend for me, but I think the thing that sticks out is, so part of the announcing duties is doing podiums. So normally what I do is I start a race, you go out there, and if you've ever done any kind of cross-country race or something like that, there's a 10-second call, and that gives the flagger a chance to get set, and then the flagger releases a row, and you do that, and you get all the rows out, and the other part of my duties are kind of during the race, I'm actually doing a live call and telling people, who's in the lead, and I basically try and get everybody's name out there at least once. Like I'll go through every class, every rider at least once, and then usually a lot of times this is kind of top 10 in each class.
See, I didn't know you got through like all of them. I thought maybe like the first 2 in each row or something. I don't hear you.
Yeah, because you're out there.
No, I'm so far away. I don't hear any of this. So that's new.
It's usually like the top 10 that I try and give people. I make a bigger deal about the first 5, like, what kind of bike they're riding and where they're from and what their last lap time was and how far that puts them ahead of the next rider that they're ahead of, and blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of round out the class 6 through 10. And then I kind of start over and make a little bit bigger deal again, like around position 11, and then kind of filter some extra information in there, because it does a couple things. Number one, it lets people know that we care about all the riders out there. And number 2, it makes it more interesting than me just going, so-and-so's in first, so-and-so's in second. You put some interest into it that way.
Yeah.
So that's another big part of it. But honestly, podiums are a lot of fun. I've developed some cool relationship with riders and that kind of stuff. And Pee-wee podiums are the best. So Pee-wees are the racers that are too young for even youth. These are the like 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds that are out there on...
Please hold. My brother just pulled in my backyard with a dump truck.
Things happen around here like that. It's nothing to be worried about. If you hear some diesel noise in the background, that's what it is. So these Pee-wee podiums are, I'm interviewing these little kids who have finished these races, and they're riding, if they're riding dirt bikes, they're riding like these little, PW50s and 70cc Hondas and that kind of stuff, depending on their age. And same thing on the quads. They're running these little, maybe 50 to 90cc quads. And kids, when they're young, they're proportioned differently. When you're an adult, I think your head's like about a seventh of your height. When you're 5, your head's like a quarter of your height.
A half.
Yeah, maybe a half. And so then put a big old helmet on top of that. So you got these kids with these huge, what look like huge helmets on these little tiny quads. And then they just want to talk about their race. They're so excited. They got like 19th place.
Yep.
And so I'm doing podiums and I'm just having a ball. Pee-wee podiums are usually the highlight of my weekend. And there's one particular boy that his name's Maverick, and he's been getting steadily better all this year. It's his first year racing, and he was, down 19th and 20th, but he wanted to do a podium, and so I did a podium with him earlier in the year, and every weekend he comes up and wants to do a podium. And this time he finished, I think, 8th or 9th overall.
So he's getting better.
He's getting better. Like every race, he's steadily improving. And so I'm doing the podium with the top 3 overall, and there's a big banner behind me. It's probably 10 foot wide by 6 feet tall. And it's got it's a vinyl banner. It's got the little flaps cut out so that the wind,
air vents, yeah,
so the wind can blow through it and it won't blow it over. And so I'm doing interviews with these other kids. And all of a sudden this hand comes out and grabs my leg, like through one of the vent holes, scares the crap out of me. I almost dropped the microphone. And I look back and I see Maverick peering through the flap at me, just grinning from ear to ear. And so I got done with the overalls and a couple other kids that were ahead of them, and then I did an exclusive one-on-one interview with Maverick and got a picture with him.
Yeah.
But he's an absolute hoot. But it made my weekend because he's gotten so cheeky with me because he's gotten so used to me, and it's just a lot of fun to interview these kids because they don't have any pride about it. They're competitive in their own way, but they're really just out there to have fun.
Yeah.
And honestly, that should be the point of racing. I mean, it's fun to win, don't get me wrong, but sometimes we just get lost in that as adults where it becomes so competitive and we get so angry about stupid stuff. And it's refreshing to be up there with these kids that they're out there racing.
Yeah.
But then when it's done, they're just like, boop, they turn it off and they're best friends again. And,
Yeah. There's one. So right near the finish line, the series had put this, it was a half of a pipe. It was actually a big steel cattle trough feeder. And it was, I don't know, 20 feet long or something. It covered the whole thing. You had to go over it. And the Pee-wees even had to go over it. And they'd put a little dirt there to kind of make a ramp for him to get over it. There was one little kid on a little 50 Honda dirt bike. This was on Saturday. And this kid did not slow down to hit this. Every lap. Every lap. I'm not kidding you. He had 3 feet of air under him, sailed it at least 15 feet, like linear traveling feet.
And those things have no suspension.
Every time you hear that shock bottom out and the swing arm slap, it just goes clack and just slams. I'm like, he's riding it right. He's standing on the pegs. His legs are taking the shock of it and everything else. And I'm looking, and the other parents that are around there, we're all just rolling because it's like, if I did that now, my back would hurt for a month. And this kid's every time. He didn't chop the throttle. He was on it the whole time. Other kids are rolling over and like sliding over on the, frame of it. Full throttle every time. Just, wow, bam, and just hammers that thing. I had to laugh every time that kid came around. It was hilarious.
The one thing that happened, I knew it was coming. I just didn't know which rider was going to do it. It was going to be a youth rider because they're the first ones out there, and youth are basically kind of like 11 to 15-ish age range.
Yeah.
And so they're a little more aggressive and they're a little more competitive. And the way this track was laid out at the finish line, when you come into the final chicane, there is basically it was
a round bale holder.
It was a round bale holder. So picture, if you will, 3 or 4 55-gallon drums cut in half and then it's laid there, and that's about the same diameter.
Yeah.
And so if you hit it right, you're going to catch some air, and if you hit it wrong, you're just going to do something horrible. And so I'm waiting for one of these youth riders to eat it. I know it's coming.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching them on the first lap, they're kind of crawling over it, and on the second lap, they're catching a little air, and you can see they're kind of enjoying it. And this kid comes in and just launches it, and for whatever reason leans forward and lands right on the front wheels. it kicks him up off the seat when he hits. I mean, he's on the pegs, but it kicks him forward even farther. Does like a full handstand on the handlebars and then flips off the front. And I knew it was coming. I mean, he was in the air for easy like 9 or 10 feet before he landed. And I'm like, this is gonna be bad. No, lean back, lean back. He didn't lean back.
Yeah.
And I immediately jump up out of my chair, run over there to see if he's okay, and he's fine. Like help me pull the quad out, and so we pull it back out, and he jumps back on and takes off again. I think more out of embarrassment than race hungry, but
Yeah.
it was relieving because then after he did it, I could just remember it, and I was just laughing all the way back to the finish line trailer. But just the picture of him, I had this mental still shot of him like Superman, full handstand on the bars.
The race series owner, his mother-in-law was racing the powder puff race, and she hit that same pipe thing, and the race series owner happened to be standing just behind one of the banners, so she like lost control and full wide open throttle right through the banner, almost takes him out. He's diving out of the way, and
We're saying lost control. I think she was trying to do him,
or she's aiming for him. Whatever.
that's my running theory, but
Yeah. So
since you've sprung one on me, you've kind of prepared for this, so it's not totally fair. But in the interest of doing a segment we've talked about, stupid stuff with Chad, we'll call it that.
Okay.
So you got to regale us with some sort of story before we get out of here.
Well, which one do you want? There are many.
I'm partial to the transmission story myself.
Okay, the transmission story. So, you guys will all get a big kick out of this. Everyone I've told it to laughs at me, not with me, at me. So, I worked in the family body shop for like 15 years, and we were pulling a diesel engine and transmission out of a truck. Now, we had already taken the cab off and the bed was off. We were stripping this one down. We were using the motor in something else. So we have an engine hoist hooked onto the engine, and we're going to pull this engine out and leave the transmission in the frame because it's just easier to leave it there. It keeps it out of the weeds and everything. So we got the engine hoist on it. It's pulling up on it, but it's just not separating from the transmission. So I'm like, okay, if I get, and for those of you who don't know, diesel engines are extremely heavy, and their transmissions are extremely heavy. So I'm like, okay, I'll get like over the transmission because it was jamming. It was like binding in it. And I'll just put my hands under it and I'll lift a little bit to take the bind out. And then we had some tension pulling back on the chain. So as soon as it frees up, the engine's going to swing away. I was in no danger, so I thought. Ha ha. So I'm like, okay, I'll just lift it a little and get the bind out of it, and then the engine will swing away and everything will be fine. So I get inside the frame rails, kind of straddle the transmission and put my arms underneath of the transmission so I can get a good grip on this thing. And they're heavy. I pulled hard. I mean, I'd been working. It was a hot day and everything else, so I'm sweating and all that. And I bear down and I grunt and I lift that transmission just enough to get it to swing away. And the problem is when it did, the motor swings away, the transmission goes straight to the ground with my hands underneath it, takes my legs out, and in the process, now the only thing that will stop me is my face. So my face stops me on the transmission, and not just on a nice smooth bit, it's on the shifter. And so I'm 210 pounds, and all 210 pounds stops right on my face, right on the transmission. It drives my tooth through my lip. It splits my head wide open. And I've been hit before by heavy things and people and stuff like that. So as soon as this happened, I didn't go unconscious, but I knew my bell was rung. And I turned to my dad, who was standing there, and my wife had just pulled in, and she saw the whole thing, and she's flipping out and getting out of her car and all this other stuff. And as soon as I could get my feet under me, and I stood up, I told my dad, I said, I have to get out of this between these frame rails, because if I go down, you're not getting me out of here until I come to. Because there's no way to pick me up and get me out of it. I mean, it would be super awkward. So by the time I had stood up and got out of the frame rails, blood is already running down my face. It's dripping off of me. My shirt is soaked in blood. I mean, I'm sorry for the graphic details, but I looked like I'd been hit by a train. It was bad. So I I got to sit down. I grab one of our stools there, and we sit down. I sit down for a minute to kind of see if I'm going to pass out, because anyone who's ever been hit good and hard, you got that like few seconds of, okay, I need to get out of the immediate danger that I've put myself in. So if I pass out in a good spot. And you kind of get that rush of heat and like, I'm not going to say scared, but
no, it's adrenaline.
You get that shoot of adrenaline instantly. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down, because as soon as this goes away, if I'm going to pass out, now's when I'm going out. My brother, he's out there with that dump truck. He doesn't even need a dump truck, but he has it out in my yard, and he's dragging something out of my woods. Now he's knocking
at the door.
Please hold.
So these are the kind of things that happen when you record a podcast live in your house. So I'm going to finish the story while Chad's doing that anyways. So here's the long story short is Chad doesn't actually end up passing out. But when they were doing this whole thing, there was another friend of theirs that was coming over because they were supposed to go play a round of golf. And so Chad, like any sane individual, instead of going to the emergency room and getting stitches and antibiotics and whatever else he needs to stay healthy, decides to basically just jam a towel on his face and go golfing. So he does like the full 18 holes. And when he gets back, again, his shirt's covered again, and the towel is covered, and I'm sure the people in the clubhouse thought something just really horrific had happened to him, but this is the kind of stuff that Chad does. He's not really worried about looking pretty in front of other people, and he's not worried about getting stitches. I can't tell you how many times I've told him, dude, you need to go get that stitched up. And he's like, nah, it'll heal. So he's got these really nice scars because it healed wide. Anybody who's had to have stitches knows if you don't get them, it heals up wide. It just fills in with scar tissue. So he's got some nice memories of these stories. Well, all right, folks, we got to get out of here. We're a little bit long on time, but I hope you don't mind too much. Once again, want to thank all of our sponsors, especially TGM Off-Road, Watch Communications, Colby Valve Stems, and utvdoors.com, and that's utv-doors.com. We've got some more episodes already in the pipe. We're excited about what's coming up. And once again, a little teaser. We are going to do an offsite at one of the most modern, most cool off-road stores ever to hit the planet. It just opened up this year, and we're going to get up there and do a live podcast from there. So a little bit of a teaser there, and I'll let you know more as we have dates solidified for that. But in the meantime, thanks for riding along with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.